or GANDER. The United Nations Security Council and the Ethic of Double Standards is a scintillating discourse on the operations of the United Nations Security Council, the main organ of the United Nations which is responsible for the maintenance of peace and security throughout the world. The book shall be launched on Wednesday, the 16th of December 2020 at the Presidential State House in Harare by retired General Dr. CGDN CHIWENGA, Honorable Vice President of the Republic of Zimbabwe. His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe and Commander-in-Chief of the Zimbabwe Defense Forces, Comrade Emmerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa, is expected to grace the occasion. The special guest who will be a representative of Her Highness Princess Dato of Malaysia is expected to deliver a royal address. The academic, security services, diplomatic corps, and invited guests are expected to witness this historic book launch occasion. Copies of the book will be available for sale to interested invited guests. GOOSE or GANDER, the United Nations Security Council and the Ethic of Double Standards. It's time for the African Voice on UNSC issues.
These were the words that were said by King Nebuchadnezzar to young Daniel. And today we witness the very same thing. The hymn GOOSE GANDER was aired in 1784. And in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, Article 1784 resonates with what we have today. I'm not a prophet, I'm a priest, but I need to read this because it is quite fitting for today. The education of the conscience is a lifelong task. From the earliest years, it awakens the child of the knowledge and practice of interior law, recognized by conscience. Prudent education teaches virtue. It prevents or cures fear, selflessness, and pride, resentment arising from guilt and feelings of complacence, born of human weakness and faults. The education of the conscience guarantees freedom and engenders peace of the heart. Let us pray. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Father, we are here gathered, for our Vice President carries an enormous burden. The decisions made in his office affect not only the lives of people in this nation, but those of our own who are in diaspora and the world at large. He especially needs your touch to lead. Strengthen him, Lord. Give him wisdom and grace. Let him speak and act with honesty and integrity in all situations. Give him a glimpse of how much you love him and how much you love the world you created around him. Draw him to yourself, Jesus, in an act of ever closer relationship with you. Anoint him like how you anointed King David with your Holy Spirit. Speak to him in the quiet moments as well as the amid of chaos. Soften his heart and make him a true servant. Bring strong, wise, spiritual, mature people to surround him. Speak truth to him through voices that emanate from your citadel. Give him wisdom as you granted the godfather of wisdom, Solomon, so that he may be able to be your gallant servant. We make our prayer through Christ our Lord.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. With your permission, may we get seated. Your Excellency, President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, Commander-in-Chief of the Zimbabwe Defense Forces, Comrade Dr. Emmerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa, and Amai. Honorable Vice President of the Republic, General Retired Dr. CGDN CHIWENGA, Honorable Vice President in absentia, Comrade Colonel Retired KCD Mohadi, Honorable Chairman, National Chairman of ZANU-PF, Comrade OCZ Mchinguri, President of Senate, Honorable M. Chinomona, Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable James Denda, members of the Politburo here present, Honorable Ministers here present, Chief Secretary to the President and Cabinet, Dr. M.J. M. Swanda, Chairman of the Public Service Commission, Dr. Vincent Wungwe, Deputy Chief Secretaries, Permanent Secretaries here present, senior government officials, service chiefs, members of the Diplomatic Corps. Special mention, we acknowledge the presence of the Charge d'Affaires of the Embassy of Malaysia, Tan Tzi Yin. Traditional leaders here present, members of the academic fraternity here present, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I welcome you all to this happy occasion where His Excellency the President, Dr. E.D. Mnangagwa, is going to launch the book by the Honorable Vice President, Comrade Dr. C.G.D. CHIWENGA, GOOSE or GANDER. Your Excellency, please allow me to invite Dr. Phyllis Johnson to give a historical perspective, basically the book review from a historical perspective. Dr. Johnson, please.
Thank you, Your Excellency. The President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, Commander-in-Chief of the Zimbabwe Defense Forces, and Chancellor Mashita, and Chancellor of the Zimbabwe State Universities, Dr. Comrade E.D. Mnangagwa. Honorable Vice President, Dr. C.G.D.N. CHIWENGA, Honorable Vice President, Colonel Retired Kembo Moadi, Chief Secretary to the President and Cabinet, Ambassadors, Cabinet Ministers and Deputies, Permanent Secretaries, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. Good evening. It's my privilege to be here and to have the task of telling you what you already know, because it's history. You know already that Africa was not present when the United Nations and the Security Council were established in 1945, and was not even invited to the table, although soldiers from Africa had fought and died and contributed to victory in the Second World War. Almost all of Africa was still under colonial rule, with some notable exceptions. So the victors in that war formed the United Nations Security Council in their own image. But that was 75 years ago. The world has changed. African countries have regained their independence, sitting on a mineral-rich continent, and have a voice. That simple fact that I'm presenting in a very simple manner has been unpacked and examined by the author in all of its complexity to give us a deep insight into how that happened, but more important, why this is still the case today, when Africa has wealth and influence and numbers, 55 member states of the African Union, 54 in the Africa Group at the United Nations, more than 1 billion people, continental free trade area, growing industrial development, a rapidly rising GDP, a continent of conservation and indigenous knowledge, a world-class market. Africa has a place in the world. African languages have a place at the UN. The author exposes the double standards and the arbitrary decisions of the UN Security Council and the damage caused. His research method is also very important because in addition to analyzing existing sources of literature on the subject, he interviewed some of the leading African strategists on the world stage, among others, and they shared their insights with him, which informs his book. These are very special insights from former leaders such as His Excellency Kenneth Kaunda, former president, His Excellency former President Sam Nujoma. Some of the people he interviewed are no longer with us, such as the late former president of the United Republic of Tanzania, His Excellency Benjamin Mkapa. One of the incisive minds of the continent who believed that something can be done quietly and strategically, or if not, then noisily and using the pressures that Africa has at its disposal. Africa has used its numbers before, strategically, and caused a revolution at the United Nations previously. So anyone who doubts the capacity of the continent to make this change should think back to 1971, even before the continent was fully independent, when it's often said by China that it was carried into the United Nations by African countries. In the passing of Resolution 2758 that recognized the People's Republic of China as the only legitimate representative of China to the United Nations. Again, led by the negotiating skills of Tanzania, Ambassador Salim Ahmed Salim, who later served as a very effective Secretary General of the OAU, now the African Union, and who was another of the author's interlocutors. This tells you the level of information that he acquired for analysis in his book. He also spoke to the former Prime Minister of Malaysia, Tun Dr. Mahathir bin Mohamad. So Africa has caused a revolution at the United Nations before, when it was only half independent. And if you read the author's book, you will see that in response to some hypocrisy and some unfinished business of colonial control, it can be done again. This is a new world. To harness the brilliant minds and strategists of the continent, like our own president, Comrade His Excellency Idi Mnangagwa, hopefully now with the support of some other former colonies, such as the United States of America, the Dominion of Canada, the Commonwealth of Australia. Yes, there is a good argument for the United States to support the reform of the UN Security Council. It was defined for the narrow world of a previous century. It's become a costly and ineffective device, hypocritical and beyond the rule of law, when a more efficient and inclusive global perspective is badly needed. Basically, the goal of this book, Goose or Gander, is to find a possible path to a more workable 21st century. The author, Dr. Constantino Gouveia Nyukadzino Dominic CHIWENGA, has done the groundwork. Here is his book. It's your job to read it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. It's important that we read it. I have hidden a lot of money in it, and I hope I will only see that people have read when the money is gone. Your Excellency, please allow me to invite Professor Emeritus Gwawi Bebe for an academic perspective on the book. Professor.
Thank you. Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, Commander-in-Chief of the Zimbabwe Defense Forces and Chancellor of the Zimbabwe State Universities, Comrade Dr. E.D. Mnangagwa. All protocol observed. It was a great delight, indeed, to go through the book, GOOSE and GANDER, the United Nations Security Council and the ethic of double standards, which was researched and authored by the Honorable Vice President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, General Retired Dr. Constantino Gouveia Dominic Nyikadzino CHIWENGA. From the outset, General CHIWENGA emphasizes the fact that colonization was not an act of civilization, nor was it any humanitarian act, but that it was an act of brutal force motivated by self-interest. The whole post-colonial discourse on neocolonialism is related to this academic thought because of the history of colonialism. The moral integrity of the Security Council is greatly questionable. The author is well justified when he argues that former colonial powers ought not to be alone on a multilateral organ of the United Nations, which is mandated with the protection of peace and security in the world. Indeed, this is why the functions of the Security Council have attracted scrutiny and criticism from an array of scholarly perspectives, including Dr. CHIWENGA's book. Honorable Vice President, retired General Dr. CHIWENGA's academic piece of work becomes part of the scholarship which advances a pessimistic view on the efficacy of the United Nations Security Council as a multilateral body for promoting and safeguarding the peace and security of the whole world. His critique of the Security Council is two-pronged. He argues that the Council has never managed to fulfill its mandate since its formation. The school of thought into which Dr. CHIWENGA falls argues that from its very formation, this institution has been a spectacle of a litany of failures, whereby substantive and substantial reform has been virtually impossible. Whilst most governments rhetorically support the call for its equity, specifically by increasing its membership and eliminating the veto. There has been very little progress on the numerical procedural changes, because absolutely no consensus exists about the exact shape of the Security Council or the elimination of the veto. Unilateral military actions by some governments of the Security Council for the purposes of safeguarding and promoting their self-interest has led to the call by this school of thought that Dr. CHIWENGA represents for the reform of the UN Security Council. He, together with other Afrocentric scholars, argue that with the current world political trends that require democracy or pluralism in governments and institutions as the ideal for governance, the UN Security Council is found horrendously wanting when it comes to the practice of democratic ethos. He critiques the Security Council for perpetuating an ethic of double standards, whereby the UN organ demands that world nations and world states should be democratic, whilst on its part it fails to live up to the democratic ethos of operating according to the voice of the majority. Put in a nutshell, the reformists argue that to democratize the UN Security Council membership or to the Council must be expanded in such a way that the new members of the Security Council should be endowed with the vetoing power. One of the critical observations made in this book is the inadequacy of the organizational culture of the UN Security Council, which undermines the promotion of democracy all over the world. The author makes specific reference to the almost systemic arbitrariness of the Security Council actions, particularly in the resolutions under Chapter 7 of the Charter, the adoption of which exclusively depends on the constellation of interests among certain members of the Council. Turning to regional and international peace missions, Dr. CHIWENGA argues that most of the missions are based on selective justice. This selective justice is obviously a manifestation of the ethos of double standards inherent in the UN Security Council. The general makes one interesting academic observation. He refers to the African political ethic of democracy by consensus or dare or baraka ra wazee in Swahili. The general points out that among the autochthonous African societies, decisions are arrived at after a long time of deliberation on the issue at hand. The African political ethical theory is thus more accommodating in the sense that everybody's point of view will be taken into consideration. Such an approach to democratic practice within the UN Security Council would enable us academics to interrogate and to undertake further research studies which would become policy perspectives or prescriptions on sustainable and workable mechanisms on how to increase the UN Security Council permanent membership so that there is effective and efficient participation of the relevant state and non-state actors in the promotion of the global peace and security. In conclusion, I want to assure my academic fellow travelers that Dr. CHIWENGA's study is elegantly based on sound theoretical formulation, as well as serious research using UN primary sources and oral interviews with African statesmen, as my colleague has already pointed out, who have well operated this UN organ. In short, ladies and gentlemen, the PhD thesis on which the book is based is a worthy piece of academic endeavor which sits well among other esteemed scholarly works. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Professor Emeritus Ngwabi Bebe Zwichimo. Your Excellency, please allow me to call upon Lieutenant General Retired Dr. Rugeje to give an international relations perspective. Dr. Rugeje.
Thank you, Master of Ceremony. Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, Commander-in-Chief of the Zimbabwe Defense Forces, Chancellor of all Zimbabwe state universities, Dr. Emerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa, sir, all protocols observed. I would like to extend warm greetings to all distinguished and invited guests present here on this lovely evening. I am immensely honored and deeply moved to be part of this book launch of the Honorable Vice President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, General Retired Dr. Constantine Gouveia Dominic Nikadzino CHIWENGA. At the outset, let me admit to be a biased enthusiast of this book because of my sentimental attachment to issues that relate to world affairs and security, and above all, for being a general officer in the Zimbabwe Defense Forces for a period close to 3 decades. More importantly, General Retired Dr. CHIWENGA's book, GOOSE or GANDER, the United Nations Security Council and the Ethic of Double Standards, is an impressive piece of work, in fact, a masterpiece that explores the intersection of ethics and world politics. It is premised on careful and meticulous research that highlights the dynamics that have shaped the United Nations Security Council since its establishment in 1945. As can be seen, the United Nations is a symbol of global order and identity. It is also a platform where states promote their parochial interests to the detriment of conflict resolution and maintenance of international peace and security. What profoundly struck me most when I read the book was that this book reminds us that the principles of state sovereignty and non-intervention remain fundamentally crucial, especially for vulnerable developing countries. The case studies cited in this literary work to bolster the arguments, namely the invasion of Iraq in 2003 and that of Libya in 2011, are very instructive. These two interventions damaged the moral credibility of the United Nations on its record on the maintenance of international peace and security. The book also lay bare the practice of double standards and the ethical dilemma that it routinely presents to United Nations in its quest to maintain peace and international security. Beyond reasonable doubt, General Retired Dr. CHIWENGA demonstrates that member states of the United Nations Security Council, especially the veto power-wielding 5 permanent members, are driven by their own national self-interests when dealing with international conflicts. Throughout, General Retired Dr. CHIWENGA highlights broader historical and political contexts that are integral to understanding how parochial the United Nations Security Council operates. In undertaking this endeavor, General Retired Dr. CHIWENGA has demonstrated his sincere belief in the importance of the subject matter at hand. With this in mind, GOOSE or GANDER is a testament to the fact that the United Nations particularly refers to the sovereignty of great powers, the so-called P5 members of the United Security Council. This is an exceptionally important and brilliant material, particularly for students who are doing international relations, and also those who are interested in reading international security and conflict resolution. It is a gift to the nation and generations to come. I can only say I'm looking forward to reading it again as soon as possible. Dinotenda, Nyabonga. I thank you. I submit, Your Excellency.
Thank you, Lieutenant General, retired Dr. Rugeje. Your Excellency, please allow me to invite the Honorable Lieutenant General, retired Dr. S.B. Moyo, to give a summary. Dr. Moyo.
Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, Commander-in-Chief of the Zimbabwe Defense Forces, and Chancellor of Zimbabwe State Universities, Dr. Emerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa. May I get the authority to address you, Honorable Vice President, as the author for this time. All protocols observed. It is indeed my singular honor and privilege to take to the podium, especially after 3 eloquent speakers, professors of repute, generals, and everybody else, just to summarize what they speechified, and take this podium to emphasize and resonate the reviews of the book, GOOSE or GANDER, the United Nations Security Council and the Ethic of Double Standards. This scholarly work was authored by a decorated and experienced general officer and also an academic. As we have by now appreciated, it focuses on the ethical double standards in the international system, particularly in the operations of the United Nations Security Council. The book is significant. In fact, it is a significant research contribution which enables readers and the international community at large to scrutinize the United Nations Security Council Eurocentric hegemonic narrative spearheaded by the 5 permanent members, P5, in pursuit of the parochial national interests. This book is an example of how the idealist realism dichotomy is prevalent, not just at nation-state levels, but within the international organizations as well. Liberalism places importance on the role of institutions, structures, and the sovereign equality of states in the maintenance of peace and security. Indeed, this was one of the reasons for the establishment of the League of Nations and its successor, the United Nations, as Dr. Johnson clearly indicated. However, in reality, the presentation and advancement of a few states and their interest have tended to override founding principles of the United Nations, and the power dynamics have subjugated the interests of other member states. Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, the first review tonight by Dr. Phyllis Johnson provided a historic perspective. It traced the origins of the UN Security Council and its evolution and gradual transformation and the actual mutation into the ethical double standard configuration it is now assumed. The historian in the author is evident as he traces the historical establishment of the United Nations contemporary status quo, including Africa's omission on the table. A question that begs an answer is the rationality of continuing to have a few victors of a war fought more than 70 years ago, presiding over world affairs and making decisions that bind the majority of member states. The relevance and the utility of a veto back then was to keep the United States of America and USSR apart during the bipolar period. But over the years, there have been emerging economic and military powers which calls for reform, however. As the author opines, the illusion of the UN Security Council reform is that from its very formation, this institution has been a spectacle of a litany of failures, whereby substantive and substantial reform has been virtually impossible. The second review by Professor Emartius Ngwabi Bebe was from an academic perspective, highlighting the unique scholarly contribution and significance of the book to the body of knowledge in relation to the academic discourse on the international system. The academic in the author is evident as he carefully confronts intellectual issues and wraps up his arguments with scholarly recommendations. The book produces a perfectly balanced scholarly work which speaks to students of international security studies and world leaders alike. It also provides a basis for future research on the UN Security Council reform. Clearly, the inadequacy of the organizational culture to impact democracy in the world. Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, the third review by Lieutenant General retired Dr. Engelbert Rugeje weighed in with the international relations perspective, highlighting the intricacies and ethical contradictions of the international system, while appreciating and expanding on existing work on the field of study. The silent niche focuses on the ethical dynamics surrounding the United Nations Security Council, particularly the ethics of double standards. The book provides an evaluation of the performance of the United Nations Security Council on peace and security matters, while simultaneously calling out the ethical and moral high ground claimed by the United Nations Security Council. In an age of liberalism, multilateralism, and pluralism, the author underscores democratization in the UN Security Council in the face of ethical considerations. The theme of double standards pervades the book. It opines that on several occasions, the UN Security Council has acted in ways that undermine its founding objectives. Regrettably, the UN cannot effectively stop aggression by or supported by a great power. Scholars note that states always apply principles of humanitarian intervention, selectively yielding policy inconsistencies. The realism thread runs through the book with observations like by the author, where he argues the powerful only intervene when it suits them, and the strategies of intervention are more likely to be driven by calculations of national interest as opposed to what is best for the victims in whose name the intervention is ostensibly being carried out. A case has been given already of Libya and Iraq having been cases of damaging rather than furthering the humanitarian cause. Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, the author is by no means attacking the United Nations. He is simply targeting the abuse of national interests surrounding the Security Council. To this end, the author neither ignores the intention nor the capacity of the United Nations to deliver on its mandate. On the contrary, he makes a plausible argument for the reform of the United Nations to deliver by practicing what it preaches. It would appear that the Machiavellian argument that in the sphere of politics there are no moral considerations prevails in the international system. To cap it all, the book is a problem or a platform for in-depth understanding of the peace and security operations of the United Nations Security Council, while simultaneously discussing the ethical underpinnings associated with the practice of double standards. The urgent and the clarion call on the need for the UN reform was made through the question on the plausibility of previously oppressed countries having their previous oppressors, colonial powers, as the ultimate guarantors of peace and security, and the unethical practice of military intervention in former colonies and the total disregard of international law, like what happens in Zimbabwe. At the same time, the ethic of double standards is being challenged by the African position of the Ezulwini consensus, which speaks to structural reforms to address issues like the exclusion of membership to the United Nations Security Council, the undemocratic practice of the veto system, among other concerns. Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, if I continue to talk on this book, I risk preempting the exciting and stimulating reading which awaits you. May I therefore take this opportunity on my own behalf to congratulate the Honorable Vice President for this sterling work and ask when we can look forward to another scintillating installment from him. I wish you a pleasant reading. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Dr. Moyo. You basically said Rawai Mega. So, Your Excellency, allow me at this moment to call upon Kenor Arauchu to give an abridged biography of the author. Kenor, sir.
Thank you, the Director of Ceremonies. Your Excellency, the President and the Commander-in-Chief of Zimbabwe Defense Forces, Comrade Dr. E.D. Mnangagwa, Vice President of the Republic of Zimbabwe and the Minister of Health and Child Care, Honorable General Retired Dr. C.G.D.N. CHIWENGA, Vice President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, Colonel Retired KCD Mohadi, Honorable Ministers here present, senior government officials, service chiefs, members of the diplomatic corps, traditional leaders, members of the academic fraternity, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening to you all. I feel humbled to be given this opportunity to share with you in brief the history of the President and Minister of Health and Child Care, Honorable General Retired Dr. Constantino Dominic Gouveia Nyikadzino CHIWENGA, at this magnanimous occasion of the launch of the book titled GOOSE or GANDER, the United Nations Security Council, and the ethic of double standards. His nom de guerre was Dominic Chinenge, while I was called Flavian Danga. I met him in 1971 at a very tender age during our school-going days at Mount St. Mary's High School in Wedza, where we were both studying. Having grown illusioned with the way the colonial regime was oppressing the black majority, we, together with others who included the late Ernest Mandiridza, who was called Peshmarere, his nom de guerre, and the late Minister of Lands, Agriculture, Water, and the Rural Resettlement Chief, Air Chief Marshal, retired Parents Shiri. We left school and joined the struggle for the liberation of Zimbabwe in 1973 when we were doing Form 3. I remember it was on a Friday, mid-morning, and we boarded an 11 o'clock bus to Harare. Apparently, we had planned not to surrender our school fees so that we would use it for transport. We used train transport from Harare to Bulawayo and then hired a taxi cab to Plumtree. It costed us $17 from Bulawayo to Plumtree. Along the way, the cabman became suspicious of where we were going. We then informed him that we were going to Tegwani High School. So when we got to Plumtree, we had to buy the usual school groceries to deceive him. We walked from Plumtree and across the border by midnight of the next day, that is Saturday, because we had left on a Friday. So on Saturday midnight, we had crossed the border into Botswana. Well, in Botswana, we stayed in state prison in Francistown. We were not arrested. We were just being kept safe in prison. So we stayed there for about 2 weeks before we were flown to Lusaka in Zambia. We were received by late General Sunavashe at Lusaka International Airport before being taken to Nampundwe Camp. Nampundwe Camp was a camp for Zanla and the Frelimo soldiers. We were then taken to Kafue Game Park camp for our initial military training before undergoing further training in Mukagao, Tanzania, under Zanla. We temporarily parted ways soon after training as I was deployed to the front. That was 1974. Only to meet later in Manica province in 1977. Due to the leadership qualities he had always exuded, the Honorable Vice President later became an instructor and a member of the General Staff before playing an instrumental role in the formation of ZIPA, 1975. ZIPA is Zimbabwe People's Army. Right. In 1977, he became the Director of Training and the Commissariat at the Chimoyo, and was also promoted to Zanla Provincial Field Political Commissar, that is Provincial Field Political Commissar for Manica Province. Well, the Manica Province that I'm talking of comprised the current Manica province, Mashonaland province, and part of Mashingo province. It was all Manica operational province. The Honorable General Retired Dr. CGDN CHIWENGA became a member of the Zanla High Command in 1978 and served as the Deputy Zanla Political Commissar until independence in 1980. He also operated at the front in Manicaland and the Gaza provinces between 1977 and 1979. At independence, he was head of liaison for Mashingo, Manicaland and Matabeleland provinces, where he played a pivotal role during the integration of the Zimbabwe National Army. I wish to thank God for having accorded me the opportunity to share part of my life with the great son of the soil. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Kene Uchu, for telling us that our Honorable Vice President is Comrade Chinenge. So today you shall read Comrade Chinenge's book. Please do. Your Excellency, allow me to call upon the Honorable Minister July G. Moyo to come and give introductory remarks to the author, Your Excellency.
Your Excellency, when I was told this morning that I was going to perform this function, I was also told that I must not read anything. That I must perform a function which requires me to quickly do what I have to do. And so I have only three things which I must do. That when you know that Dr. CHIWENGA was born in Weza, and that he went to school as the colonel was talking about. It so happened I met a young man in Nairobi, a Zimbabwean. He was working for the European Investment Bank. And as I was walking out of a place where I should have been drinking, because I have not found anybody who I could drink with, he then said to me, Comrade Moyo, where are you going? I said, I'm going to my room. He said, then he talked in Shona. I said, who are you? He said, let's go and sit, let me buy you one. So as we were sitting, I said, who are you? He said, no, you won't know me. My only fame is that I went to school with a general and an air marshal. I said, oh, who? He says, Comrade CHIWENGA. And Air Chief Marshal retired, the late Comrade Shiri. I said, that's interesting. So I couldn't think of how to continue with the conversation. I said, so in class, who was beating who? I wanted a confession. He said, he thought about it on how to tell me. And he said, I could not beat Comrade CHIWENGA in mathematics. I said, mathematics for a general? He said, yeah, I could not beat him. And Shiri, he said, that one was a natural leader. He led the strike when senior ones were there. And I said, what about you? He said, no. When everything was put together, I beat them. So I could not verify. General CHIWENGA obviously went to join the armed struggle as an academic, as an aspiring academic. And the result of what we see today is rooted in where he came from. The next time I saw somebody was during COPAC. We were doing some work, us from ZANU-PF and others from MDCT, others from MDCN. And in MDCT, there was a professor from the university. And Dr. CHIWENGA had just defended his second master's degree. And he had defended before and in front of this professor who was a critic of the ruling party. So I said, Professor, how did you allow a general to have master's degree? Fortunately, the general had already told me what had happened. So he used to call me senior. He said, senior, we have never been subjected to academic excellence the like we were done by this man. We thought he was going to defend his thesis qualitatively, and we were ready to question him, but he went quantitative. And the chairman asked the first one, what do you say? He said, no questions. Next one, no question. Third one, no question. So Professor Makumbe says, the late, said when it came to him, he had to say something. I mean, I just couldn't keep this man without saying something. Then he repeated what he told me, that I told the general that this is too excellent, it's above us, and we just thank you for giving us this thesis. So that is the general who is an academic, that is the general who is a general, that is the general who has written a book. And when I heard that he had written a book, I never thought he would be writing about international, because I know the amount of knowledge that he has about this country, its culture, its people, its origins, its interrelatedness of our people. Whether some came from the south or some came from the north, or some were indigenous, he can weave it together and create one nation called Zimbabwe. So this is the general, Your Excellency. I am going to ask all those gathered here to invite, and I hope you will allow me to invite everyone to join me in welcoming our general, our Vice President, the Minister of Health, Dr. CHIWENGA. I thank you.
Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe and Commander-in-Chief of the Zimbabwe Defense Forces and Chancellor of all Zimbabwe state universities, Comrade Dr. Emerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa, and Amai Guru wangu, she is here with us in spirit. The Honorable Vice President, Colonel Retired Campbell, Dagish Mohadi, in absentia. We thought he would join us, but he's still out on a mission given by His Excellency. Speaker of the National Assembly, Advocate Jacob Mdenda, President of the Senate, Comrade Mabo Chinomona, members of the Politburo here present, honorable ministers here present, the Chief Secretary to the President and Cabinet, Dr. Mishek Sbanda, Chairperson of the Public Service Commission, Dr. Vincent Wungwe, Deputy Chief Secretaries, Permanent Secretaries here present, senior government officials, service chiefs, members of the diplomatic corps, traditional leaders here present, members of the academic fraternity. I see Professor Ngwabi and Dr. Phyllis Johnson. Thank you. She gave me a fright, Your Excellency. She was the first lady of Kara to interview me during the war. And I was so frightened, but we have walked a long journey together. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I am pleased to be with you all this evening at the launch of my book titled GOOSE or GANDER, the United Nations Security Council and the Ethic of Double Standards. The book was published by University Utara Malaysia Press. Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, comrades and friends, this book is dedicated to my colleagues in the struggle, both living and departed. It would have been a great pleasure had my colleague for lifelong, together with His Excellency here, the President, who is not only my President, but my brother, and the Air Chief Marshal who parted from us this last July. I would have wished he was here, because we used to, to share quite some ideas. But I hope wherever he is, he will be able to see what we are doing and to keep on giving us the guidance. It is a product of an interest that started more than 30 years ago, when, as a General Staff Officer, I developed an interest in recording the history of world affairs. As someone who has spent the greater part of my working life as a high-ranking military officer, issues of national and international security have been central to my career. Notably, I have been privileged to contribute to peace and security within my country, Zimbabwe, the Southern African Development Community region, SADC, the African continent, and the world at large. Your Excellency and distinguished guests, This book is the outcome of an academic journey that yielded a doctoral thesis at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. The immediate trigger to writing this book was the foiled attempt by some Western powers to intervene in Zimbabwe in 2008. I hope we still all remember. It was on 12 July 2008 that the Western powers and their cohorts proposed to impose sanctions on Zimbabwe, citing a plethora of unsubstantiated claims ranging from violation of human rights to absence of democratic space. The intention was, however, to evoke Chapter 7 of the United Nations Charter. Under Chapter 7, Article 41 provides for the employment of all measures other than military force to maintain international peace and security. Then there's Article 42, which justifies peace enforcement by military force. As the world would witness a few years later, Libya, unfortunately, could not escape a similar machination in 2011. And the rest is now history. I have attempted to provide, through this book, a comprehensive account of the operations of the key organ of the United Nations responsible for the maintenance of international peace and security. This is particularly an important development as I attempt to fill the current gap or lacuna in the public understanding of the role of the United Nations Security Council in international conflicts, especially from a developing world perspective. For all intents and purposes, in my book I argue that despite the principles of sovereign equality of members expressed in Article 2 of the United Nations Charter, in reality, when deciding on international matters, members are not equal because of the structure of the Security Council, which enables some members to wield veto power. I thus attempt to answer persistent questions about the credibility of the United Nations interventions by tracing the history of the Security Council and the employment of military force as an instrument by some great powers in contemporary times. More importantly, the future of the United Nations as a global governance entity is determined by the manner it is designed to facilitate international order. Although the United Nations is created to strengthen global order, by design, the provisions of Chapter 5 of its charter relating to the Security Council as a result
The Honorable Vice President, Constantino Dominic Gouveia CHIWENGA, is a decorated nationalist and leader whose contribution to the country's history, military expertise, and modern socio-economic climate is exceptional. Born Constantino Dominic Gouveia CHIWENGA, he took time to explain the roots of his many names.
You know, I am Dominic CHIWENGA. That's what I was popularly known during the past struggle. That is before 1980. But it so happened that Dominic was also part of my name. Disagree can quickly become antagonistic and difficult to resolve. Thus, all things considered, the Security Council's decisions depend entirely on the interests of its veto-wielding P5 states. In other words, Security Council resolutions can be implemented or enforced only if powerful states care about them. In this book, I put two infamous cases into perspective. This is the invasion of Iraq in 2003 by the United States of America-led coalition of the willing, and the NATO intervention in Libya in 2011. The two cases highlight persistent questions about the legitimacy of wars sanctioned and not sanctioned by the United Nations Security Council. In both cases, the Security Council was guilty by either omission or commission. As a result, this has raised questions about whether the United Nations' current structure should be reformed. Against the background of double standards in the operations of the United Nations Security Council, there is a very urgent need to reform the United Nations' current structure, as well as to nurture ethical practices of key actors in the international community. In my opinion, the burden of this task falls on the United Nations General Assembly due to its universal membership. At this juncture, let me single out several individuals and institutions that contributed to the production of this book. My special appreciation goes to my immediate boss, His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, Commander-in-Chief of the Zimbabwe Defense Forces, Chancellor of the State Universities of Zimbabwe, Comrade Dr. Emerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa, for his personal support as an elder brother in making my academic endeavors a success. From the time he was the Minister of Defense, then Vice President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, up to this day as the head of state. Your Excellency, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I wholeheartedly thank Professor Munyaradzi Felix Murove, who was supposed to be with us this evening, but this is the time when universities are writing their examinations. Because of COVID, there was delay in most universities setting their examinations, or for the students to write their examinations. They should have been with us. Professor Murove, my supervisor and mentor at my alma mater, the University of KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. I am very grateful to him for the manner in which he guided me during my doctoral studies. I also appreciate the support and encouragement of the Deputy Chief Secretary. He is right sitting in front of me, Comrade George Charamba, in the initiation and completion of this book. I think he was the first one to review the book. Let me also acknowledge the support of University Utara Malaysia through its School of International Studies, the Zimbabwe National Defense University, the Ministry of Defense and War Veterans Affairs, and my staff, which provided support for the planning, organization, and launching of my book. Further, I would like to express my thanks and deep appreciation to the Vice Chancellor of University Utara Malaysia, Professor Dr. Ahmad Bashawi Gan, as well as those from the University Utara Malaysia Press, for successfully coordinating this project and printing this book. On a personal note, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to Lieutenant General retired Dr. Engelbert Rugeje, Colonel Dr. Sadiq Maeresera, and Dr. Knox Tapiwa Zengeni for their assistance in various ways and beyond the call of duty. I am very grateful to all individuals who contributed to the success of this book. Finally, I wish to thank my loving family for consistently supporting and inspiring me as I worked on my doctoral thesis as well as this book. I thank you all for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Vice President. Can we give him another round of applause? Your Excellency, please allow me to invite Honorable Kane Matema to deliver his congratulatory message. Honorable Matema.
Thank you, Professor Murira. Your Excellency, sir. All protocols observed. I received a phone call last night, Your Excellency. Only last night. Inviting me to come and do my best in performing what I'm supposed to perform now. I was invited by the office of the Honorable Vice President to come and say a few words, congratulatory remarks. Dr. CHIWENGA, General CHIWENGA, Amhlophe, Makorokoto, you have joined that group of academics of Zimbabwe who have had some of their works, some of their research efforts being published in book form. You have therefore contributed to the development of academia in Zimbabwe, to the development of research in Zimbabwe. I feel proud, Your Excellency, because the stories, the history of Vice President CHIWENGA reminds me of my own history, sir. I myself joined the armed struggle. I joined ZIPRA in 1968 with Solomon Mjuru. They talked about walking to France, driving to Plumtree, walking to Francistown. I and a colleague called Beguzulu Kumalo, Your Excellency, also worked from Zimnyama and Plumtree up to Francistown in 1968. I feel proud because many times those of us who participated in the liberation struggle have not been given or have not had the opportunity to write about events that affect our country today. The United Nations indeed has to be reformed. The Security Council has to be reformed because the world belongs to all of us. No country exists alone. All countries exist together. But on the other hand, if you look at the Security Council as it was designed soon after the World War II, it was designed to protect the interests of certain countries. But 4 million years ago, I'm mentioning, Your Excellency, 4 million years ago, because the oldest human remains in the world have only been found in Africa. 4 million years ago, Your Excellency, people walked from Africa to anywhere in any part of the world. They worked across the isthmus, across the Suez Canal. There was no Suez Canal, in fact, across what is the Suez Canal today, to Asia, to Europe, to the Americas. There were no boundaries. And indeed, even today, there are no boundaries. This is why we found our own products of Zimbabwe all over the world, and this country is full of products from all over the world as well. We are one, and therefore we have to protect every nation, every country has to have the right to speak and be understood, doesn't matter how big it is. The Security Council, indeed, some members of the Security Council, Your Excellency, do their best in the world to make sure that certain leaders must be removed from power. Because, like normal, like always, politics is based on the economy, is based on economics. The powers that be in the Security Council are interested in their own economic interests. But what we're not saying we don't want to be in the Security Council. We want Africa to be represented as well. We want all countries to be represented there. What we have today in Zimbabwe, I could be wrong, Your Excellency, but your leadership clearly shows that we all in Zimbabwe have to live together. We all in Zimbabwe have to eat or use the economy, use the resources of this economy together. We're different, we're diverse in terms of color, in terms of tribes, in terms of religion, in terms of political affiliations. But none of us, therefore, should stand up and say, it's only me. I don't think His Excellency has a Security Council like the Security Council exists of the United Nations. We have a leader who invites all of us to debate, and he laughs at us if we don't debate. And then he says, please, tomorrow don't blame me. So, all countries have to live together and share the resources of this world. Now we're talking of climate change. The countries that were involved in bringing about climate change and the heat, the changes everywhere, it's not us. It's not us developing countries. It is indeed the same countries that dominate the Security Council today. Vice President CHIWENGA, join us. Not join us. You have joined us. Join those of us authors who have books that are published. Dr. Johnson, I've worked with her for many years, publishing some of my books. Your Excellency, I have more than 25 titles, published books in Zimbabwe by several authors, by several publishing companies. It is not easy to have your book published. When you have a book or an article published, it means you're putting your neck on the block. Come and chop my neck if you want. And indeed, if you're a good author, put your neck on the block and defend what you have written and have published. So Zimbabweans, ex-combatants, let us be brave and invent and research like our ancestors researched and created Great Zimbabwe, the biggest monument that this country has ever had. Congratulations, Comrade CHIWENGA, Nyabonga Mtala, Your Excellency. Thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Matema. Your Excellency, you must have seen me asking Honorable July Moyo. He had no piece of paper. And I said, kwa munyori. And it is repeated again. So we have moving encyclopedias, Your Excellency. Your Excellency, please allow me at this moment to invite His Excellency, the Ambassador, who is the Acting Dean of the Diplomatic Corps, Gabriel G. Riyad. Your Excellency.
I think this is okay. Your Excellency, allow me, the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, Emerson D. Mnangagwa, to convey this congratulatory message to General CHIWENGA, who is at the same time the Vice President of this nation. Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, Emerson D. Mnangagwa, Honorable Vice President General Retired Dr. C.G.D.N. CHIWENGA, Honorable Ministers here present, Permanent Secretaries of various ministries here present, colleagues, the members of Diplomatic Corps, ladies and gentlemen, All protocol observed. I would like to extend my sincere thanks and gratitude on behalf of the diplomatic corps upon the launch of the book GOOSE or GANDER, the United Nations Security Council and the Ethic of Double Standards. The book gives a precise argument on the existence of the United Nations, which though is recognized as an international body that recognizes the sovereignty, equality of its members, exposes the gap created by some provisions of the Security Council, especially Chapter 5, which relates to the existence of the 5 permanent members with veto powers. There is indeed a call by the author to remove double standards by the United Nations. I agree that working methods of the Security Council must be revised to ensure democratization, and its membership must be expanded to include new permanent and non-permanent members of the developing world, especially Africa. The African Union, or AU, has been a fundamental actor in the enforcement of peace and security. The representation of African states in the United Nations Security Council should be revised according to the standard of the international law. Finally, Your Excellency, I wish all the people of Zimbabwe Merry Xmas and Happy New Year. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Ambassador Gabriel Riak. Your Excellency, President of the Republic of Zimbabwe and Commander-in-Chief of the Zimbabwe Defense Forces, Chancellor of Zimbabwe State Universities, Dr. Emerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa. Your Excellency, at this moment, we are inviting the author, Honorable Vice President, to sign some complimentary copies and hand them over to His Excellency the President. Your Excellency. Yeah. And the officials, please.
born Nyikadzino. Nyikadzino was a name given by my grandfather. But here is the iron of it. My mother did not like it.
Wow.
The name. So, but at the same time, my grandfather did not like, the Christian name Constantine. So he was, he would call me Nyika. Nyikadzino. Nyikadzino. But I only started using all these names after the demise of my grandfather.
Okay.
As a young man, the Honorable Vice President was a gifted scholar whose academic record was outstanding, but left school to join the liberation struggle of Zimbabwe in 1973. Initially, he trained in Kafue, Zambia, before undergoing training at Mgagao, Tanzania, under the People's Liberation Army instructors. He later became an instructor and member of the General Staff before playing an instrumental role in the formation of the ZIPRA at Morogoro in 1976. The following year, in 1977, he became the director of the Training and Commissariat at Chimoyo, and before long, he was promoted to Zanla Provincial Field Political Commissar in a region that presently covers Manicaland, Mashonaland, and parts of Masvingo Province. He became a member of the Zanla High Command in 1978 and appointed Deputy Chief Political Commissar until independence in 1980. At independence, he was head of liaison in Masvingo, Manicaland, and Matabeleland provinces during integration. After independence, he was promoted brigadier on 16 April 1981 and appointed the
Thank you, Your Excellency. Your Excellency, allow me to announce that the first course, it's about food now, is served. And could the entertainment please go on? Thank you, Excellency.
First black commander of 1 infantry brigade up to November 1984. He rose through other general ranks and commensurate appointments until becoming full general on 1 January 2004 and assuming the appointment of Commander Zimbabwe Defense Forces. He is an undisputable champion of the Operation Restore legacy through astute and resolute command, as well as exceptional interactive ability and negotiation. A decorated general and recipient of most medals, Vice President CHIWENGA is a recipient of the Grand Commander of the Zimbabwe Order of Merit, as well as the Liberation Decoration, gold and silver medals. He obtained a first-class Masters of Business Administration with the Zimbabwe Open University in 2008, going on to qualify with a Masters in International Relations degree with the University of Zimbabwe in 2011, whereby he then enrolled at the University of KwaZulu-Natal at the same year for a PhD in ethics, graduating in 2015. Vice President enjoys doing research and discussing African military and political history. regional and international conflicts, peace and security issues. The Honorable Vice President, Constantino Dominic Gouveia Nyikadzino CHIWENGA, is a decorated nationalist and leader whose contribution to the country's history, military expertise, and modern socio-economic climate is exceptional. Born Constantino Dominic Gouveia Nyikadzino CHIWENGA, he took time to explain the roots of his many names.
You know, I am Dominic. CHIWENGA. That's what I was popularly known during the past struggle. That is before 1980. But it so happened that Dominic was also part of my name. And, you know, born Nyikadzino. Nyikadzino was a name given by my grandfather. But here is the irony of it. My mother did not like it. Wow. The name. So, but at the same time, my grandfather did not like, you know, the Christian name Constantine. So he was, he would call me Nyika. Nyikadzino. Nyikadzino. But I only started using all these names after the demise of my grandfather. Okay.
As a young man, the Honorable Vice President was a gifted scholar whose academic record was outstanding but left school to join the liberation struggle of Zimbabwe in 1973. Initially, he trained in Kafue, Zambia, before undergoing training at Mgagao, Tanzania, under the People's Liberation Army instructors. He later became an instructor and member of the General Staff before playing an instrumental role in the formation of the ZIPRA at Morogoro in 1976. The following year, in 1977, he became the director of the Training and Commissariat at Chimoyo, and before long, he was promoted to Zanla Provincial Field Political Commissar in a region that presently covers Manicaland, Mashonaland, and parts of Masvingo Province. He became a member of the Zanla High Command in 1978 and appointed Deputy Chief Political Commissar until independence in 1980. At independence, he was head of liaison in Masvingo, Manicaland, and Matabeleland provinces during integration. After independence, he was promoted brigadier on 16 April 1981 and appointed the first black commander of 1 infantry brigade up to November 1984. He rose through other general ranks and commensurate appointments until becoming full general on 1 January 2004 and assuming the appointment of Commander Zimbabwe Defense Forces. He is an undisputable champion of the Operation Restore legacy through astute and resolute command, as well as exceptional interactive ability and negotiation. A decorated general and recipient of most medals, Vice President CHIWENGA is a recipient of the Grand Commander of the Zimbabwe Order of Merit, as well as the Liberation Decoration, gold and silver medals. He obtained a first-class Masters of Business Administration with the Zimbabwe Open University in 2008, going on to qualify with a Masters in International Relations degree with the University of Zimbabwe in 2011, whereby he then enrolled at the University of KwaZulu-Natal at the same year for a PhD in ethics, graduating in 2015. Vice President enjoys doing research and discussing African military and political history, regional and international conflicts, peace and security issues.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Your Excellency, President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, Commander-in-Chief of the Zimbabwe Defense Forces, Chancellor of the Zimbabwe State Universities. Your Excellency, sir, please allow me to invite the Honorable Minister of Defense and War Veteran Affairs, who is also the chairman, the national chairman of the ZANU-PF party, Honorable OCZ Mchinguri Kashiri, to give us an introduction to the guest of honor. Honorable Mchinguri.
Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe and the Commander-in-Chief of the Zimbabwe Defense Forces, also Chancellor of the Zimbabwe State Universities, Comrade Dr. E.D. Mnangagwa, Honorable General Retired Dr. C.G.D.N. CHIWENGA, Vice President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, the President of Senate, Comrade Mabo Chinomona, members of the Politburo here present, Honorable Ministers, Chief Secretary to the President and Cabinet, Dr. M.J.M. Sibanda, Chairperson of the Public Service Commission, Dr. V. Hungwe, Deputy Chief Secretaries, Permanent Secretaries here present, all protocol observed. I feel greatly honored, indeed humbled, to be introducing to you a man who has committed himself to be taking Zimbabwe to the status of an upper middle income economy by year 2030. Our guest of honor is an accomplished entrepreneur, ardent farmer, scholar, lawyer, and cadre of the liberation struggle, which brought our political and economic independence. He is an esteemed and astute politician and business leader who is passionate about transforming Zimbabwe into a business-friendly environment, destination with a stable and supportive microeconomic environment by 2030. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, our guest of honor has vast experience in politics, business, and good corporate governance. Over the years since 1980, he has held an array of responsibilities, which he has executed with honor, humility, and pride. He previously served as Minister of National Security, Minister of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs, and a leader of the House, Speaker of Parliament, Minister of Rural Housing and Social Amenities, and Minister of Defense. He also served as Vice President of the Republic of Zimbabwe and Minister responsible for the administration of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs, as well as Second Secretary of the ruling party, ZANU-PF. Our President's acumen in diplomacy remains unparalleled. He has and continues to engage with regional and international community, marketing our country as a safe investment and tourist destination. You may also recall that the recent regional and international solidarity against sanctions imposed on Zimbabwe bears testimony to his diplomatic feat. Because of his leadership on the diplomatic front, we have recently witnessed considerable foreign direct investment into the country. His aspirations are broad and targeted at ensuring that business thrives in Zimbabwe without any hindrances. In line with his great vision, the country has made great strides to ease the doing of business. He has been on the forefront in condemning corruption in all its forms and at whatever level, whilst pursuing a development agenda that leaves no one behind. Ladies and gentlemen, His Excellency is an unparalleled frontline fighter against COVID-19 pandemic. He has commanded from the front in our resolve to contain the pandemic. He has put in place mechanisms to reduce the loss of lives while setting our economic trajectory on a positive developmental path. His Excellency is a scholar par excellence and has been an inspiration to most of us who believe in his leadership. He has been encouraging all of us to improve our education, research, as well as rewrite our own history. You are making history when in the new republic you have introduced and launched the African Liberation Museum in Zimbabwe. And you have also introduced the statue of Mbuya Nehanda and that of General Khumalo in recognition of their gallantry in fighting against colonialism. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe and Commander-in-Chief of the Zimbabwe Defense Forces, Dr. E.D. Mnangagwa, to address us. Your Excellency, sir.
Pray, be seated. Our Director of Ceremonies and Minister of Higher and Tertiary Education, Innovation, Science and Technology Development, Professor Dr. Amon Murira. The Vice President and Minister of Health and Child Care, Honorable General Retired Dr. Constantine Gouveia Dominic Nikadzino CHIWENGA. The Vice President, Honorable Colonel Retired Tugish Mohadi, Kembo Mohadi, Minister of Defense and War Veterans Affairs and Chairman of the ruling party ZANU-PF, Honorable OCZ Mchinguri Kashiri. The Minister of State for Harare Metropolitan Province, Senator Engineer Chidao. Members of the Politburo of the ruling party who are here. Other ministers who are here. Members of the diplomatic corps who are here. I can see my young brother. See, I want to say something about this young man. Kalfan Kamal. Let's see. This young man. Okay. We've been together for 40 years. And then he suddenly became Consular General of Oman. And then he demanded that I should call him His Excellency. His Excellency, the Excellencies, members of diplomatic corps who are present, His Excellency the Ambassador of Malaysia to Zimbabwe, captains of industry and commerce who may be here, the President of the Senate, Comrade Chinomona, the Speaker of the National Assembly, Advocate Mdenda, Chairman of the Public Service Commission, Dr. Ungwe, the Chief Secretary to the President Cabinet, Dr. Svanda, other senior government officials who are here. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, comrades and friends. Before I make my statement, I'd like to make a small observation that today, the 16th day of December, 2020, this ceremony has put to rest the perception that soldiers are not educated. I am privileged to join you today at this momentous occasion as we launch the book entitled GOOSE or GANDER, the United Nations Security Council and the Ethic of Double Standards, authored by the Vice President, Honorable General Retired Dr. Constantine Gouveia Dominic CHIWENGA, which provides practical and deep insights of an astute historian cum political scientist. I'm particularly enthused and grateful that I was privileged to endorse this work through my foreword to the book. My brother, the fact that we have brought on board renowned authors like Dr. Phyllis Johnson and Professor Emeritus Ngwabi Bebe Wejilachena, then your work is excellent. I congratulate you, Honorable Vice President Chiwenga, for this scholarly work, which will leave an indelible mark in the discourse of international relations and prove useful for future generations, academics, political leaders, and general readers alike. Makorokoto, Amhlope, congratulations for this milestone achievement. The fact that Vice President CHIWENGA managed to carry out research and subsequently publish this book in spite of the busy schedule attests to his inherent culture of hard work, strength of mind and the will, as well as his determination and perseverance. As alluded to by earlier speakers, like General Rugeje, General S.B. Moyo, VP CHIWENGA has demonstrated his abilities as an avid researcher and a scholar of international history and politics. The book we are launching epitomizes the Vice President's lifelong dedication and contribution to Pan-Africanism, our national revolutionary ideals, and a fervent desire to see a world characterized by justice, equality, and equity. The challenges of entrenching these ideals are laid bare in this project through his articulation and exposition of the ethical dilemma faced by the United Nations Security Council in dealing with peace, security, conflict prevention and resolution. As argued, the contradictions in dealing with these issues are more glaring with regards to developing countries, in particular African countries. The launch of this book is quite opportune, as Africa, informed by one of the African Union flagship projects, continues on the quest of silencing the guns on our great continent. As we constantly review our efforts in this regard, views and perspectives such as the ones expressed in the book we are launching today will undoubtedly guide us to useful, practical, and responsive interventions. Informed by our rich history as developing countries and the ongoing abundant lessons in the geopolitical realm and literal works, we are reminded of the need to deliberately and more consciously defend our interests as the people of Africa and the developing world in general. Ladies and gentlemen, the case studies of the invasion of Iraq in 2003 and that of Libya in 2011 are aptly presented and argued in the book. He also refers to the invasion of Kuwait in the book, and it gives interesting reading and analysis. Equally scrutinized is the moral credibility and integrity of the United Nations Security Council in terms of its objectivity, capacity, willingness, and readiness to maintain universal international peace and security. Furthermore, the book highlights the operational challenges that characterize the management of global affairs. The case in point is the application of double standards by some permanent members of the United Nations Security Council in the management implementation of their mandate to promote and maintain international peace and security. My brother fell short of saying the United Nations Security Council is an animal farm. In our case in Zimbabwe, the illegal imposition of sanctions has seen us witness firsthand the ethical dilemma within our august global body. To this day, our people and our development journey continue to be frustrated under the weighty socioeconomic and developmental limitations as a result of these heinous sanctions with no justification. It is the considered view of the author, my young brother, that the United Nations Security Council system needs reform in order to objectively defend and promote human rights, international peace and security. This view resonates with the African Union's position on the need for the speedy implementation of United Nations Security Council reforms is espoused in the Ezulwini Consensus and reiterated in the CITA Declaration in Tripoli. Meanwhile, as sovereign states, we must remain alive to our responsibility and respective roles in peace building, security, conflict prevention, management, and conflict resolution from both a domestic and international perspective. In this regard, the importance of strengthening our national institutions and processes to entrench democracy, constitutionalism, good governance, and the rule of law cannot be overemphasized. As government, it is incumbent on us to guarantee against social uncertainty and insecurity among our people. We must equally arbitrate justly between groups and provide credible assurances of protection towards the prevention of anarchy and societal fractures. Therefore, there is need for versatility in state actions with regards to peace, security, conflict prevention, management, and conflict resolution, more so now with today's unique security complexities. These include terrorism, climate change, geopolitical aggression and intransigency, legacies of regime change proponents, and the cross-border criminal activities, among other aspects. Coupled with the above, efforts focused on poverty alleviation, food and nutrition security, economic empowerment and equitable development, as well as climate change mitigation, and disaster risk management must be prioritized towards entrenching sustainable peace, sustainable security, sustainable unity and development. On our part as Zimbabwe, my administration is unwavering in its commitment to fully implement our national development policy as espoused in the National Development Strategy 1 towards improving the quality of life of our people and accelerating sustainable development which leaves no one behind, even under the chains of sanctions. Similarly, my government will carry on being decisive with regards to entrenching constitutionalism, democracy, and the rule of law. The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and the global health emergency has brought to the fore the importance of effective multilateral cooperation in building a future we all want. The need for reform of the United Nations remains crucial for this important world body to enhance its capacity towards effectively playing its coordinating role in contemporary global affairs. We should not allow multilateralism to be threatened by the blind pursuit of the narrow interests of a few. Zimbabwe remains available to play its part in global solidarity in the search for lasting solutions to the challenges that confront our world today. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, my administration is prioritizing scientific research, innovation, and development as critical pillars to a knowledge economy and sustainable socio-economic growth. I challenge the intelligentsia of our country to be more active in undertaking contemporary research which informs our national policies for the various sectors of our economy. Our education cannot be regarded as important if it does not result in the production of goods and services. With regards to the field under discussion today, my government stands ready to support scholars and practitioners of international relations and political science, as well as those who have served in the diplomatic field, established national strategic think tanks. I'm sure those of you had doubts as to the quality of government. Today you've seen that it is quality persons. This is more urgent now as we chart the irreversible path of seeking African solutions to African problems, and also telling our story as Africa, to offer alternative perspectives from the unjustifiably domineering Eurocentric views which has kept us all these years looking down on ourselves. Allow me once again to congratulate you, Honorable Vice President CHIWENGA, for extending leadership beyond governance and politics by publishing this scholarly work. The perspectives shared in this book will positively contribute to the body of knowledge in international relations and allow greater discussion around the subject matter. The book is indeed a must-read. My fear, however, were it not that a revolutionary by background, as a result of your research capabilities, you could be stolen to become a professor at one of the universities. But I remain assured that because of your revolutionary background, you remain in the revolutionary party and the government. I challenge you, Honorable Vice President, to continue publishing more scholarly research work which will contribute towards the growth of the body of knowledge in various socio-economic and political matters. I have two authors, no, more than two authors, including the one who has spoken, Honorable K. Matema. I have several others in cabinet. However, with these remarks, it is now my honor and privilege to declare the book, GOOSE or GANDER, the United Nations Security Council and Ethic of Double Standards, officially launched. I wish you all a Merry Christmas and a prosperous New Year. God bless you all. God bless Zimbabwe. May I now formally launch the book by cutting the ribbon. It stands launched. Yeah, here in the Randinda, Dora Varakui. Thank you and good night.
Another round of applause for His Excellency the President. Thank you, Excellency. We are guided. Your Excellency, let me take this opportunity to say dinner is served. This is our second last item, Your Excellency, before the vote of thanks is given by the Professor Paul Mapfumo of the University of Zimbabwe. But in the meantime, dinner is served. Thank you, Excellency.
The Honorable Vice President, Constantino Dominic Kuveyanyikadzino CHIWENGA, is a decorated nationalist and leader whose contribution to the country's history, military expertise, and modern socio-economic climate is exceptional.
Shared with us his remarks concerning the book that has just been launched, entitled GOOSE or GANDER by Honorable CHIWENGA. Now, if you're just joining us, we are at the State House today on Wednesday, the 16th of December, 2020. My name is Curtly Gwindi, and this is the launch of GOOSE or GANDER, a book entitled GOOSE or GANDER by the powerful and obviously very, very milestone achievement by Honorable CHIWENGA. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this indeed is going to be a day that is celebrated, because the President has just come through saying that this book marks just not only the power in what we have as a nation, but the power in what we can speak about as an entire country concerning the whole SADC region and the world at large. And like we've just said, we're at the State House today. We've had some very enlightening remarks as well coming through from the UZ Vice Chancellor, Professor Paul Mapfumo. Honorable SB Moyo rather has spoken, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, as well as a renowned historian, Dr. Priscilla Makhenge. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, we are here at the State House. Please do stay tuned for more. Otherwise, we are just coming to the end of this event. Thank you very much for joining us. You are live on ZBC News. My name is Curtly Gwindi, and I am reporting from the State House, Harare, Zimbabwe.
The Honorable Vice President, Constantino Dominic Kuveya Nyikadzino CHIWENGA, is a decorated nationalist and leader whose contribution to the country's history, military expertise, and modern socio-economic climate is exceptional. Born Constantino Dominic Kuveya Nyikadzino CHIWENGA, he took time to explain the roots of his many names.
You know, I am Dominic. CHIWENGA. That's what I was popularly known during the past struggle. That is before 1980. But it so happened that Dominic was also part of my name. And, you know, born Nyikadzino. Nyikadzino was a name given by my grandfather. But here is the iron of it. My mother did not like it. Wow. The name. So, but at the same time, my grandfather did not like, you know, the Christian name Constantine. So he was, you know, he would call me Nyika. Nyikadzino. Nyikadzino. But I only started using all these names after the demise of my grandfather. Okay.
As a young man, the Honorable Vice President was a gifted scholar whose academic record was outstanding, but left school to join the liberation struggle of Zimbabwe in 1973. Initially, he trained in Kafue, Zambia, before undergoing training at Mugagao, Tanzania, under the People's Liberation Army instructors. He later became an instructor and member of the General Staff before playing an instrumental role in the formation of the ZIPRA at Morogoro in 1976. The following year, in 1977, he became the director of the Training and Commissariat at Chimoyo, and before long, he was promoted to Zanla Provincial Field Political Commissar in a region that presently covers Manicaland, Mashonaland, and parts of Masvingo province. He became a member of the Zanla High Command in 1978 and appointed Deputy Chief Political Commissar until independence in 1980. At independence, he was head of liaison in Masvingo, Manicaland, and Matabeleland provinces during integration. After independence, he was promoted brigadier on 16 April 1981 and appointed the first black commander of 1 infantry brigade up to November 1984. He rose through other general ranks and commensurate appointments until becoming full general on 1 January 2004 and assuming the appointment of Commander Zimbabwe Defense Forces. He is an undisputable champion of the Operation Restore legacy through astute and resolute command, as well as exceptional interactive ability and negotiation. A decorated general, and recipient of most medals, Vice President CHIWENGA is a recipient of the Grand Commander of the Zimbabwe Order of Merit, as well as the Liberation Decoration, gold and silver medals. He obtained a first-class Masters of Business Administration with the Zimbabwe Open University in 2008, going on to qualify with a Masters in International Relations degree with the University of Zimbabwe in 2011, whereby he then enrolled at the University of KwaZulu-Natal at the same year for a PhD in ethics, graduating in 2015. Vice President enjoys doing research and discussing African military and political history, regional and international conflicts, peace and security issues.